Rita stood behind the closed door of her grandmother's old office. Her hands trembled as she picked up the pen to sign a contract that felt like a life sentence. She could hear the hum of the bustling bakery downstairs, where customers were unaware of the painful decision she was about to make. Sweet Dreams was on the brink of collapse, weighed down by debt. If she did not accept this deal, the bakery would be auctioned off, and her grandmother's dream would vanish. The thought of losing their family legacy made her stomach turn. But the agreement she was signing felt just as crushing. She took a shaky breath and looked at the man standing across from her. Nathaniel Smith wore a sharp suit and exuded confidence. He was the famous real estate developer who had transformed many neighborhoods across the city. His cold eyes now rested on her, waiting for her signature. He had offered to pay off her bakery's debts if she agreed to spend time with him for a set period. She felt torn and humiliated. It was as if she was selling part of herself. "Your bakery means a lot to you," Nathaniel said in a low voice. "And I assure you, I'm not trying to destroy it. I promise you'll thank me one day." Rita swallowed the lump in her throat. She had no other choice. Her family's future and the memory of her grandmother who started Sweet Dreams depended on this. She would never forgive herself if she let the bakery close. With tears brimming in her eyes, she signed her name, her heart pounding as if it were warning her she was about to lose everything she held dear. Unsettled and unsure of what she had just agreed to, Rita slid the paper back to Nathaniel. He took it without a word, then offered her a solemn nod. In that moment, she could not imagine how deeply this decision would change her life. Several weeks earlier, Rita had arrived at Sweet Dreams early in the morning, the way she did every day. She flicked on the lights and breathed in the scent of flour and sugar that always made her think of her grandmother. This bakery was not just a business, it was her family's pride. Her grandmother, Regina Brown, had started Sweet Dreams almost 50 years ago. She brought warmth to the neighborhood with her famous cinnamon rolls and gentle smile. Rita grew up at her grandmother's side, learning how to fold dough just right and how to make every customer feel like family. But after her grandmother passed away, the bakery fell on hard times. Bills began to pile up, and Rita discovered her family owed a large sum to the bank. The debt had grown bigger than she ever imagined. Eventually, the bank threatened to close the bakery if she didn't find a way to pay. Rita tried to keep the problem to herself. She worked extra hours and tried new recipes to attract more customers. She reduced expenses, sometimes even skipping meals to save money. But each day, she found more overdue notices in the mail. One afternoon, as she was trying to clear her mind, she looked out the bakery's front window and noticed a giant billboard advertising a new development project by Smith Enterprises. This company was known for changing entire neighborhoods, often knocking down old buildings and replacing them with fancy modern ones. Rumors spread that they would soon target Rita's neighborhood. Rita's heart sank. Sweet Dreams was in the middle of a historic community. Her grandmother had loved every shop on the block, from the quirky bookstore to the family-owned flower shop. The idea that a big corporation might buy out these smaller businesses made her furious. She wondered if there was a way to protect her bakery and her neighbors from such changes. But those thoughts got pushed aside when she went to her mailbox and found another final warning from the bank. They would seize everything in 2 weeks. Despair set in, and she felt alone in her battle to save the business. She asked local investors for help, but nobody wanted to risk their money on a failing bakery. Just as she was about to give up, an email arrived. It came from an assistant at Smith Enterprises requesting a meeting. At first, Rita thought it must be a mistake. Why would the same huge company, which often replaced places like hers, want to meet with her? She almost deleted the email, but she hesitated. Perhaps there was a chance that Smith Enterprises was interested in preserving some of the local charm. That was how she found herself in the glossy lobby of the Smith Enterprises building, feeling small and out of place. Suits bustled around her, carrying files and talking into their phones. Giant glass walls and sleek furniture made her long for the comforting smell of bread back at the bakery. Then Nathaniel Smith stepped out of the elevator, tall and composed. his gaze locking onto her as though she were the only person in the room. He greeted her with a smile that seemed polished and guarded. Rita couldn't stop noticing how every movement he made was slow and calculated, like he was always thinking 5 steps ahead. "Thank you for coming," he said, showing her into his office. The windows offered a view of the city skyline, gleaming in the afternoon sun. "I've heard about your bakery's troubles." Rita blinked. "You have?" Nathaniel nodded. "I grew up around here, you know. I remember those cinnamon rolls from when I was a kid." He paused, a flicker of something soft crossing his face. "I'd like to help." Rita sat up straighter in her chair. "Help how?" "My company invests in various properties," he explained. "But I don't want to see sweet dreams disappear. I'm prepared to cover your debts and even fund an expansion. In return, I'd like your partnership in a new project I'm envisioning for the neighborhood." It sounded too good to be true. She asked him a few questions, and each time he calmly reassured her. His plan was for Sweet Dreams to become a community center of sorts, a place for local events. He wanted her to use her baking skills to unite people and draw attention to his wider development projects. She should have guessed there was more to his offer. At the end of the meeting, he cleared his throat. "However," he added, "there's one condition. I want to spend time with you personally." Rita gaped at him. "I don't understand." He leaned forward slightly, eyes fixed on hers. "I'm not talking about a typical business partnership. I want to get to know you. I know how this sounds, but I found that when I believe in someone's dream, I like to be close to it. That means I'd like you by my side for a certain length of time, attending functions, dinners, and planning sessions with me." His voice was steady, but his request felt strange. She had never heard of such a thing. Was it just a business tactic or something more personal? Rita's instincts told her to run, but she thought about the bakery, her grandmother's legacy, and the possibility that this might save everything. She felt uncertain, but she said she would think about it. Over the next few days, Rita battled with her thoughts. Could she trust him? Was she willing to become tied to Nathaniel Smith, whose vision might threaten the old neighborhood's character? She walked through the bakery, remembering the stories her grandmother used to tell about building friendships with every patron who walked through the door. Sweet Dreams was more than a shop. It was a meeting place. Children came in after school for cupcakes, and seniors gathered to chat over fresh coffee. People celebrated birthdays, engagements, and graduations here. Finally, she called Nathaniel's assistant and arranged a second meeting. When she arrived, he wasted no time and presented her with a formal contract. There, in black and white, were the details. Smith Enterprises would pay off every penny of her debt and provide funds to renovate the bakery. In exchange, Rita would devote a set number of months to working closely with Nathaniel, accompanying him to business and social events, and assisting him in shaping part of the neighborhood development plan. "That's not all," he said, raising an eyebrow. "I have one more condition." She braced herself. "You must let me manage the finances of Sweet Dreams while we're in this arrangement," he said quietly. "That way, I know my investment is going where it needs to go." Rita felt her stomach drop. Giving him control of the bakery's finances meant placing its future in his hands. But at that point, her finances were so dire that she couldn't even pay her staff on time. After he spoke, there was only silence. She could hear the ticking of an elegant clock on the wall. She realized her entire life, and the bakery's fate, hinged on her next words. "All right," she whispered. She signed the agreement, never imagining that her promise to spend time with him would feel so personal, nor that it would change the course of her life. From the moment the ink dried, Rita's life became a whirlwind. Nathaniel had her attending business lunches with his team, who all looked at her with curiosity. During these lunches, she felt like a fish out of water, but Nathaniel remained poised. He included her in discussions about architectural plans and budgets, even though she had little understanding of large-scale developments. He also arranged for designers to inspect Sweet Dreams. Before she knew it, they had started remodeling. They replaced worn wallpaper with fresh paint, installed energy-efficient lights, and updated the kitchen with modern equipment. At first, Rita was delighted. She had dreamed of these improvements. But when she saw the receipts, she felt a pang of guilt. It was all so expensive, and it felt like the bakery was no longer entirely hers. Still, things were looking brighter. The next few weeks saw a surge in customers, drawn in by the bakery's new design and the excitement around Smith Enterprises' local revival project. Rita began to see that Nathaniel's involvement might actually be helping the community. As they spent more time together, their relationship shifted. Dinner meetings turned into more relaxed meals. Nathaniel would ask about her grandmother's recipes, showing a genuine interest. He enjoyed hearing about how Rita experimented with new pastries late into the night. Sometimes he even stopped by Sweet Dreams just to watch her bake. In return, Rita got to glimpse a different side of him. Beneath the confident, businesslike exterior, she found a man who admired her dedication and who once had dreams of creating beautiful spaces without harming local culture. He told her about the first building he restored in a neglected neighborhood and how proud he felt to see families move into the apartments. They began to share small, sincere moments. One evening, Rita made him a chocolate cake as a thank you for his help. He tasted it with closed eyes, like he wanted to soak in every hint of flavor. She noticed a softness in his smile she had never seen before. For the first time, she wondered if he had a tender heart hidden behind all his corporate decisions. Not everyone was impressed with Nathaniel's plans. Some board members at Smith Enterprises worried about the cost of renovating old buildings. They wanted to build sleek, modern complexes that would bring in higher profits, even if it meant pushing out small businesses. Rita overheard arguments during phone calls. Nathaniel tried to tell his board that the community mattered, that preserving local businesses would bring a different kind of long-term value. But many saw it as a waste of resources. One evening, he came into the bakery looking worn out. His shoulders slumped slightly, and he seemed frustrated. "Rita, the board is pushing me to raise rents in the area," he said quietly. "They see these shops as outdated." Rita's heart pounded. The neighbors trusted her not to let the bakery expansion harm them. "But you promised me," she said. "You promised to protect this community." Nathaniel ran a hand through his hair. "I know, and I'm trying. I need more time to convince them." As she saw the worry in his eyes, she remembered how she once thought him cold and heartless. But now she saw his struggle. She took his hand and squeezed it gently. "We'll find a way." They decided to host a large neighborhood event at Sweet Dreams to show the board that the community had real value. They invited everyone, families, local business owners, even the board members themselves. Rita baked day and night, creating trays of cookies, cupcakes, and pies. Nathaniel arranged for a small jazz band to play in the corner. On the night of the event, the bakery glowed with lights and music. People talked, laughed, and shared stories of how the neighborhood had changed their lives for the better. Board members slowly warmed to the idea that there was something special here, something worth preserving. Nathaniel gave a heartfelt speech about growth and progress that should not wipe out history, but build upon it. Rita stood by his side, her heart full of hope. After the event, news spread that Smith Enterprises might be more community-friendly than people thought. More customers visited the bakery, curious about the man behind the changes. Rita and Nathaniel spent long hours planning new ways to support local shops. They wanted to integrate small businesses into the bigger developments, ensuring that everyone could benefit. During these late-night planning sessions, Rita would pass him a plate of freshly baked cookies, and he would flash a grateful smile. They chatted about their lives beyond work. Rita told him about the first time she ever baked a cake at age 7, how she spilled half the flour on the kitchen floor. Nathaniel, in turn, spoke about how he grew up poor, but was determined to make something of himself. Soon, their interactions were not just about the business deal. They began going for walks around the block, greeting neighbors by name. They watched children play in the street, discussing the importance of safe public spaces. Their hands brushed occasionally, and one evening, Nathaniel leaned in and kissed her softly under the glow of a street lamp. It felt like stepping into a dream. Rita's heart fluttered at the surprising closeness, but she also felt a rising sense of fear. Their arrangement was temporary. What would happen when the contract ended? Tensions mounted with some of Nathaniel's board members. One of them, a man named Mr. Clark, was pushing for a complete overhaul of the neighborhood. "We're missing out on big profits," he said at a board meeting, directing his glare at Nathaniel. Nathaniel stood firm. "We've seen from the event at Sweet Dreams that the community is on our side. Let's build something that brings in both profit and preservation." Mr. Clark sneered. "That's not how business works. You're forgetting what got us to the top in the first place." A heated discussion followed. Rita, who had come along to deliver homemade cupcakes to the staff, happened to witness it. She felt Nathaniel's frustration as he tried to defend their new plan. But she also saw the doubts begin to creep into his eyes. That night, as they sat together in the bakery's office, Nathaniel seemed distant. He stared at his phone, where text messages from the board blinked nonstop. "Are you going to give in to them?" Rita asked softly, her heart pounding at the thought of losing all they had worked for. He looked up, eyes clouded with uncertainty. "I don't want to. But if I don't deliver bigger returns, they might replace me as CEO." Fear gnawed at Rita. Smith Enterprises was powerful enough to do whatever it wanted without Nathaniel's leadership. If someone else took over, that person might not care about saving the bakery or the community. She felt tears burning at the corners of her eyes. The entire neighborhood's future rested on Nathaniel winning this battle within his own company. Days turned into weeks. Nathaniel fought with the board behind closed doors, while Rita worked around the clock to keep Sweet Dreams thriving. She organized community bake sales, cooking classes for kids, and charity drives that donated part of the bakery's profits to local causes. The neighborhood rallied around them, grateful for the fresh hope they felt. The little shops along the street began painting their facades and improving their signs, inspired by Sweet Dreams' transformation. Everything seemed poised for a lasting change. However, trouble struck when Mr. Clark discovered that Nathaniel was funneling extra funds to help local shops stay afloat. He confronted Nathaniel at a major board meeting, accusing him of risking company assets. "I've had enough," Mr. Clark declared. "Either you commit to the board's vision, or we vote to remove you from your position." Nathaniel's jaw tightened, and he looked at Rita, who had been invited to speak about the success of the community events. She approached the podium. Her hand shook, but she steadied herself. "Smith Enterprises can achieve its goals without tearing down everything that makes this neighborhood special," she said. Her voice quivered, but her words were clear. She explained how preserving local business brought in tourists and loyal customers. She insisted that growth and tradition could go hand in hand. For a moment, there was silence. Then the board members broke into quiet discussions among themselves. Mr. Clark, however, wasn't convinced. He demanded a vote. In a tense decision, the board members decided by a narrow margin to keep Nathaniel as CEO. They wanted to see if his plan could bring the profits he promised. Mr. Clark stormed out in anger, but for the moment, Nathaniel and Rita had won. Several days later, Rita was at Sweet Dreams, wiping down the counters, when she realized it had been exactly 6 months since she signed the contract. The deal had ended. The bakery's debt was cleared, the renovations were complete, and the community was on a healthier path. But there was a problem. The moment the clock struck midnight on the final day of their arrangement, Rita felt an ache in her chest. Would Nathaniel walk away now? She dreaded the possibility that their relationship might have only been tied to the contract. She heard the bell above the bakery's door ring. It was Nathaniel, looking a bit apprehensive. "Hi," he said softly. "Hi," she replied, forcing a smile. "Everything seems to be in place," he said, glancing around the bakery. "You have the new ovens, the finances in order. The remodeling is done." Rita nodded. She tried to read the expression on his face. Was he relieved? Sad? Did he even want to stay? "I guess that means our deal is over," she said, her voice trembling. He opened his mouth to speak, but closed it again. Then, taking a step closer, he reached for her hand. "No," he said, his tone firm. "I refuse to let this end. I don't want to walk away." She felt tears prick her eyes. "But you said—" "It started as a business arrangement," he admitted. "But it turned into so much more. You've changed how I see the world. You showed me that success means more than just profits. I've never felt this kind of connection before." Emotions swirled inside Rita. On one hand, she was relieved he wanted to stay. On the other, she wondered if his board would keep fighting him. And if so, could their relationship survive such tension? Nathaniel gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "I'm not leaving you or this bakery. I want to build a future here with you, if you'll let me." Their relationship no longer had a contract hanging over it. Free from that pressure, they spent time exploring the neighborhood hand in hand. They talked with the store owners, listened to concerns, and developed fresh ideas for how Smith Enterprises could support growth without sacrificing the community's heart. Eventually, Nathaniel introduced Rita to some of his closest colleagues as his partner. She attended meetings not just as a formality, but as someone whose opinion mattered. Together, they formed a small team dedicated to responsible development. A sense of hope spread across the neighborhood. Sweet dreams blossomed into a cherished landmark. New families moved into renovated homes, drawn by the charm of the old buildings and the sense of belonging the bakery offered. Rita and Nathaniel held monthly town halls there, where residents could voice their needs and suggestions. Rita's passion for baking seemed to grow stronger as well. Now that she didn't have to worry about debt, she experimented with recipes she had long imagined. She created a special community cupcake, decorated with sugar flowers that symbolized the unity of all the local shops. Customers lined up to buy it, and part of the proceeds went toward neighborhood improvement projects. One afternoon, Rita received an urgent call from Nathaniel. He sounded nervous, which was unusual for him. "Can you come to the old community garden behind the bakery?" he asked. "I need to show you something." Her mind filled with worry. Had the board discovered a loophole? Was Mr. Clark trying to sabotage them again? She quickly locked up sweet dreams and headed to the garden. When she arrived, she found the usually quiet space filled with string lights, colorful bunting, and rows of potted flowers. The soft scent of blooming roses hung in the air. A small group of their neighbors stood to the side, smiling knowingly. And in the middle of it all stood Nathaniel, looking both excited and anxious. He approached her slowly, taking her hands in his. "Rita," he began, his voice warm, "I asked you to come here because this garden is part of your grandmother's dream for a vibrant neighborhood. It's also a place I want to help revive, just like we did with Sweet Dreams." She noticed how carefully he had arranged everything, how he had thought of details like her grandmother's favorite type of roses. "You and I started as two people who barely trusted each other," he went on, laughter dancing in his eyes. "But you taught me to see the value in people, in memories, in tradition. You helped me fight for what I believe in, not just for profits. You brought joy into my life like nobody else ever has." He glanced back at the crowd, who began to clap in encouragement. Then Nathaniel turned back to Rita and lowered himself onto one knee. A hush fell over the garden. "Rita Brown, will you marry me?" he asked, opening a small velvet box to reveal a simple yet elegant ring. Tears slid down her cheeks. She couldn't speak for a moment, overwhelmed by the emotions coursing through her. Then she found her voice. "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, I will." Cheers and applause erupted around them. Nathaniel slipped the ring on her finger, and she pulled him to his feet, throwing her arms around him. It felt like a promise that went beyond any contract. A promise that their shared dream of family, love, and community was real and would last. In the days and weeks that followed, the bakery glowed with excitement. Customers congratulated Rita, neighbors dropped off flowers, and the ring on her finger sparkled almost as brightly as her smile. Word spread that Smith Enterprises had officially adopted a new policy of community-centered development. Nathaniel had secured enough influence on the board to make sure local voices would be heard in every project. Rita and Nathaniel hosted a big celebration at Sweet Dreams, inviting anyone who cared about the neighborhood. They set up a long table covered with a white cloth piled high with pastries, cookies, and slices of every pie Rita could imagine. The smell of freshly baked bread drifted onto the street, drawing people in like a warm hug. Standing on a small stage next to Nathaniel, Rita took the microphone. She felt no trace of the shy, uncertain baker who had first walked into Smith Enterprises, fearful of losing her grandmother's dream. "Thank you for believing in us," she said, her voice carrying a note of emotion. "This bakery's Sweet Dreams has always been about bringing people together. Now I see more clearly than ever how love and community can go hand in hand. Nathaniel and I promise to continue fighting for what makes this neighborhood beautiful." Applause thundered, and the crowd surged forward to congratulate them. Rita saw tears in the eyes of some older neighbors, who told her they had thought no one would ever care about preserving their little corner of the city. Later, Nathaniel pulled her aside, away from the crowd, and led her to a quiet table. He placed a gentle hand on her cheek, smiling. "You've given me something I never thought I'd have," he said. "A reason to use my position for good, not just success. You've also shown me what it means to love someone." She leaned against him, relishing the warmth of his presence. "I couldn't have saved the bakery without you," she replied. "You saw more in me than just a struggling baker." They stood there for a moment, taking in the sounds of chatter and laughter, feeling the spirit of a neighborhood that was finally coming alive again. Months later, as Rita locked up Sweet Dreams after another successful day, she paused to glance at the empty tables. Sunlight from the setting sun made the bakery windows glow with a golden hue. The hush of the evening reminded her of when she first realized how close she was to losing everything. But now she was no longer alone. Walking outside, she found Nathaniel waiting with a smile, ready to join her for a stroll around the block. They waved to the bookstore owner, who was closing up. Across the street, a family enjoyed ice cream from the shop next door. Children ran around in the dusk, laughing as they played games on the sidewalk. Rita slipped her hand into Nathaniel's. She thought about her grandmother, who would be proud of what Sweet Dreams had become. Not only was it saved from closure, but it stood as a beacon of hope. It represented the idea that business did not have to destroy what people cherished. Instead, it could support the very essence of a community's heart and soul. As they walked, Nathaniel paused under a street lamp. He turned to her with a grin that made her pulse quicken, even now. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" he asked. They were scheduled to meet investors who were finally interested in backing a plan for more affordable housing in the area. Rita smiled. "I'm ready," she said, her eyes shining. "With you by my side, I'm not afraid." They shared a gentle kiss, a simple promise of what lay ahead. Their journey had begun with a desperate contract that made her feel sold, yet it had led her to find real love. The future stretched out before them, bright and full of possibilities. And in every dream she had for Sweet Dreams, she knew Nathaniel would be there. Hand in hand, they would build a world where love, community, and success all thrive together.